Welcome to another episode of the Animal Liberation Hour, where we seek insight from animal rights and liberation activists who inspire us to get active for animals worldwide. I'm Michelle, and for this episode, I sat down with Rae Case, founding director of Fluffy Butt Rescue and Sanctuary. Before we get into the episode, I want to announce that Animal Activism Mentorship is now Animal Activism Collective. Mentorship is still at the heart of our organization and will continue as a vital part of what we are now calling AAC. However, our name change better represents the inclusive, collaborative nature of our community. Please visit our website and follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and reach out to us if you'd like to sign up to become a mentor or a mentee. So now on to our guest. Rae Case founded Fluffy Butt Rescue. Fluffy Butt Rescue provides sanctuary with a commitment to creating a world where both animals and humans thrive in harmony. I know Rae personally, and she is one of my favorite humans. So here we go, my conversation with Rae. Hey there, Rae. Greetings and welcome to the Animal Liberation Hour, my friend.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am so excited to speak with you. You are founding director of Fluffy Butt Rescue and Sanctuary in New Jersey. As such, along with your husband, Rhodes, you do the hard but rewarding work of providing sanctuary for rescued farm animals. And we're going to talk all about that. But first, let's start with your activist origin story. Tell me about the family you grew up in and their relationship to animal rights activism, and what message did you get about animals growing up?
Yes, I was very fortunate to grow up in a really open-minded household where my parents would pursue any sort of interest that my brother and I had. So anytime we were inquisitive about something, they would encourage us to learn more, research. They would sign us up for classes, and that really shaped us pretty well. Um, my brother was in his early teens, and he became really curious about where his food came from. So my parents took us to animal rights meetings on the Lehigh Valley campus, and we became informed about various forms of animal exploitation. I knew meat came from an animal, but I never thought of animal abuse as a child. And one of the things I saw was an elephant being mistreated at a circus. That was a video that they showed. And my heart crumbled. I think I was probably 7 or 8. And after that, I never looked back. I knew I wanted to fight for the animals. And my family all went vegetarian around the same time. And we started doing activism together at fur stores and the local circus when the circus came to town, which was really interesting because my friends would be pulling into the mall parking lot, and there I was with a sign on the corner. And my friends would beep and wave, and then strangers would tell a 7 or 8-year-old to get a job. And and I never quite felt comfortable holding that sign. I knew I believed in what I was, pushing for, but I just never felt comfortable in that role as an activist. So I have a lot of respect for activists that are just on the front lines, in front of everyone, in the public. That's just, it wasn't a place where I was comfortable. And so, it's great that I found a form of activism that makes a lot of sense for me. Other kids thought it was weird, but also like kind of cool that they knew a vegetarian kid. And I was able to like teach them what it meant. And some, my friends agreed that, eating animals isn't nice, and that is a little strange. Um, and I'm raising my daughter vegan, and she's forming her own beliefs, and she's starting to educate her friends about what that means. And I overhear these like little conversations that her and her friends are having, and I don't interject. I just let her do it her way, and it's really nice. And she's fortunate to have another vegan kid in her class. So yay, that didn't happen when I was a kid. just one vegetarian kid in the school, and she's got two vegan kids in her class. So I try and take that as, like a symbol of where the world is going.
I love that. I love that. It's an unusual, or maybe I should say unique story, your upbringing, and yet I also think it shouldn't be so much, the way that your mom and dad instilled morals and values and also gave you room to grow, to come to be yourself, to think for yourself, and find yourself within that. And really just compassion when you were still forming, being the legacy that they passed along to you. And so in my mind, and I'm sure in yours, we can fast forward that trajectory to exactly what you're doing now. The connection is so clear to that, your early days and what you're doing now. So let's fast forward now. Did you ever imagine yourself opening a sanctuary? Of course, the answer is no, because who knew what a sanctuary was, back then. But what events, how do you, connect it to the outcome of your opening a sanctuary? And in this case, I often feel like it's one of those things where the path finds you. Is that true in this case?
I think partially, yeah. I was actually lucky that I did know what a sanctuary was as a kid. My brother and I were never really interested in pop culture. We did not ask, let alone beg. We did not ask to go to Disney. We went to the beach maybe once or twice, but I remember the most memorable vacations. We went to Farm Sanctuary in Watkins Glen. Um, and and even as vegetarians around Thanksgiving, we felt really strange with family being at a table with a dead turkey. So we decided, like, why spend our holiday like that? That's not what we want to do. And so we started going to Farm Sanctuary on Thanksgiving to feed the turkeys. And I actually met my first vegetarian kid friend there, and that felt really good. But fast forwarding to me having my own sanctuary, I did not plan that at all. It was really never a conversation that my husband and I had before starting it. It just luckily started slowly with one animal. Um, and then, it progressed, and then there were conversations about where this was all going, and we're constantly reassessing and having those conversations, just to make sure it works for our family.
Yeah. So the first animal was Mama. So you could talk about her and like, when did you officially open Fluffy Butt? And what is your mission, your vision, and your core values?
Yeah. Our first rescue was Mama, and that was January of 2020. No one knew COVID was coming. So by March, um, I worked a full-time teaching job. So when March rolled around and my school said, we're closing our doors for 2 weeks, that was my next rescue. I thought, well, okay, I have a little bit of time. Unfortunately, we didn't have Mama anymore. Mama passed. So now I got a couple weeks to focus on another animal. It's much easier to do that when you have some time off of work than when you're working full time. Um, and Mama's story, someone had told me about her. She was paralyzed, left in a field to die, right? Someone didn't want to spend the money to either euthanize her or try and rehab her. And that's all I heard. I heard that there is a downed alpaca left alone. And I wouldn't have been able to hear anything else, right? So I knew I had to do something about that. I just knew I had to save her. And I really didn't have experience rescuing animals. My mom would, bring in strays, but as far as farm animals go, that was like never something I anticipated happening. But we do have land and we do have a barn, so it wasn't out of the question. Um, so we went and got her, and she couldn't stand, she couldn't move anything besides her head and her neck. And this was when I was working, so I had to organize this small army to come help take care of her. And that included giving her medications, giving her love, and the most difficult part, putting her in this harness and lifting her up to try and strengthen her legs. And so that was part of her physical therapy in, 20-minute blips 3 times a day. And that was one of the most difficult things I've done. It was so incredibly physically, mentally, and emotionally exhausting. And once we made the difficult decision to euthanize Mama, I cried, and I cried for like 2 weeks straight. I'll never do that again. That was horrible. And that feeling changes once you've grieved and started to process, and you have a change of heart, and another beautiful being comes into your life that needs you. So that was sort of my start of Fluffy Butt. That was January, and then by March I applied to be a nonprofit. So that was sort of like the sequence of where it all went. And yeah, I guess the rest is history there.
Oh, yeah. Mama's like the matriarch.
Absolutely, and that's why I named her Mama. I don't know if she was ever a mama, but that's why her name is what it is.
Yeah, it's like all the other animals who've come after her are like her children, right? If it wasn't for her, maybe you would have anyway started, but what a blessing, and I'm sure you feel her in that way. So tell us a little bit about Fluffy Butt in terms of why you exist and, you know, who you are as a nonprofit, what you stand for, and your values there.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're a vegan micro sanctuary, so smaller scale sanctuary located in New Jersey. And we're dedicated to providing a safe haven for farmed animals. So we don't do domestic animals like cats and dogs. Um, we have 20 residents, including alpacas, sheep, pigs, chickens, ducks, and turkeys. And everyone has their own rescue story, and everyone has their own unique needs. So we strive to educate the community through their inspiring stories. And I love to tell people that we are 100% operated by volunteers. I'm not paid. The 10 people that come here weekly to help me are unpaid. None of us are getting any sort of monetary value out of this. And I think that's a true testament to the love and the dedication and the passion that we're putting into it. Um, yeah. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, we want to talk and dive more into that sort of the operational aspect of this, and put the animals front and center and talk more about those beautiful beings whom you care for. But I want to, for our listeners who might be somewhat uninformed about sanctuaries in general. So, generally a sanctuary is defined as a safe haven, a protected space. But a farm sanctuary is really so much more. As you're saying, it's sort of this it has a message, right? And it's symbolic in so many ways, and it shows us what's possible in our world. So, but for you, what does sanctuary mean for you?
Sanctuary means, yes, that safe haven where animals are valued for who they are, for being an individual. They are cared for as far as their health and their well being is concerned. And a sanctuary is operated by people who do their research and know what they need. That's such an important part of it. It's not just that we invite these animals to live here and that's that. We strive to know about every species that we have. Um, and a sanctuary, I do believe that there is a community component of that. I think it's really important for the local community to know that we're here and what we're doing. And there's such a need for micro sanctuaries, because if we had more micro sanctuaries in our communities, I think that would be more education, hyper locally. And then we live in a very rural area, so there is a need for a farm animal sanctuary. People love animals. They love to see goats. They love to see sheep. Everyone has some sort of connection to those animals. But to learn their stories of when their lives aren't um, successful or valued, they all have these traumatic pasts, and people don't see that unless there's someone there to show them and educate them about it.
Yeah, so maybe it's important to point out a little bit at what sanctuaries are not as well, because what misconceptions exist about farm sanctuaries, and people may confuse them with petting zoos, which they're not, or farms, right? Like operating farms who breed animals. Um, there's a big difference. So, can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. It's really hard for people to know when an animal sanctuary is a legit sanctuary. Um, like you said, petting zoos and places that breed animals, um, those are for typically for profit, right? Or they're using the animals for human purposes. Petting zoos are for entertainment. Whether they say there's an educational component or not, um, you know, they're there mainly for human service, right? And then there are some rescues, and I put that in quotes that have fundraisers that serve barbecues, that have food trucks come and have meat, and that is such a contradictory thing to do. So that's a huge red flag, right? That would show that this is not a sanctuary. There are dead animals intentionally being brought in. And if you want to know if a sanctuary is legit, find out if they're vegan, right? It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle that puts animals first. It's a peaceful lifestyle. And so if a sanctuary is vegan, they're doing it for the animals. They're not doing it for humans.
Yeah, so I mean, sanctuary is a generic term, and it's as such, it's unregulated, and people can just sort of slap that label on what they're doing, can take that label, and some may do that innocently, and other places may do that deliberately to manipulate and get funding or bring people in or have a certain optic, I guess. So it is important what you're saying that people do their research and, like you said, look for those red flags. Um, it's really important, and folks can and ask around is another way to know. Like, ask, "Do you know of or this sanctuary?" Because very often your community, if you have a vegan community especially, they may know in that regard.
I even have a vegan friend recently who texted me on Halloween saying, I just got this business card from a man who's pulling a potbelly pig dressed in a costume during trick or treating. And he's pulling the pig behind a hot dog truck. But his business card said, we're a nonprofit focusing on um, placing domestic potbelly pigs. And what a contradiction, right? And I said, are you sure those two things were together? Is that possible?" And she said, "I'm sure. Like, can you look into this nonprofit and tell me, from your experience, what can you tell about this place?" And of course, I looked it up, and it's no good. It's no good.
Yeah. Yeah, you get a vibe sometimes, but once sort of like you and I, you know what to look for, right? And it jumps out often right away, and sometimes just by checking their website. And we're not trying to speak ill of anyone, but we do want to educate is what we're doing. And even in terms of when you see something like goat yoga, how do you feel about that? Or 4-H fairs, and people don't really look with a critical eye or think of that in terms of animal exploitation.
Yes, that's right. Is goat yoga cute and fun? Absolutely, but who's that for, once again? And if you go to goat yoga, are there old goats, right, who have arthritis and can't jump on your back when you're in down dog, right? Where do those goats go? And those are the goats that we often see on Facebook Marketplace for free. And that doesn't end very well typically unless a sanctuary sees them. Um, I forget what the other one you asked about. Goat yoga and
Or 4-H fairs and those types. Yeah, which is
yeah. Yeah, that feels really bad to me because these kids, these teenagers are being taught how to raise an animal and love them and then let them go. And they don't see where they go, right? And that always surprises people when I tell them because I often get people saying, "Oh, you should have the 4-H kids volunteer at your sanctuary." And I say, "I really should. I should because then I'll show them what an animal's life looks like up until the very end when they're loved, right?" Um, and so I might do that. I might.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, sanctuaries are a branch of the animal rights movement. Um, what roles do sanctuaries play in the animal justice movement? And I say, I'm sure you agree, we cannot achieve animal liberation without them. And you said to me, this is your form of activism. This is what it has, transformed itself, transmuted itself into for you. It's your activism in the world. So say a little bit about that.
Absolutely, yeah. Even though I was, doing activism from a young age, like I said, carrying a sign, holding a sign outside of a business was not comfortable for me, and I didn't feel confident, right? And so those people, they are so special to me, right? Because that is just unfathomable to me that someone could have those really intense conversations face to face and be smart about it and not be afraid of that person who's in your face and they're angry. That is just not my place. But my place doesn't exist without their place. And these people who are fighting for animals using their voices are the people that often have those animals surrendered. And then what? Right. And then they seek out a sanctuary for those animals to go to. And then I love it. They come back and they visit and they keep in touch and they tell other people and they post about that animal on social media. So it all comes together. Right. One of my favorite things recently was Revolution Philadelphia coming to Fluffy Butt just for a day of relaxation at the end of a really intense protesting season for them. And Monsi was there, and she was the person who saved Mukti from a factory farm ventilator shutdown. And when I was giving the tour, I told all the animal stories, and then we got to Mukti, and Monsi told her story. And that, there were tears, there were emotions, and it was such a beautiful moment to have someone else tell her story, right? Like I hadn't even heard the full story. So that was a really great example of it all coming full circle. And I'm always telling people about Mukti's story on every tour that everyone knows Mukti. She's our girl.
Yeah. Yeah. When you pull back and zoom out and see how we're all working as a team and everybody's sort of doing their part within this one movement, with this one, larger movement. Shout out to Rev Philly as well, and for
Love them.
we love those women run, women led. We hope people will look them up. Let's talk a bit about the vegan sanctuary community because you've already mentioned that since all legit sanctuaries have the same basic goal or intention, you're truly a community that comes together when necessary. Yes? And you're a unique network that connects both locally and nationally. And it's important to work together and support and rely upon each other. So, how crucial is that? In other words, your connections, your relationships with others who run similar sanctuaries of different sizes in different places, and give us outsiders a sense of what that community is like. And any idea how many sanctuaries exist? There's no database, no formal database,
No,
right? That
no.
I wish there was. I wish that would be a good work, another nonprofit to begin to sort of be that, create. I'm sure there are some informal databases I've come across, but Wow.
Yeah, I have a map, like an interactive map of all the vegan sanctuaries in New Jersey because when I get asked if I can take an animal and I can't, I send that out to the person. Like, here are places that I trust that are doing great work that will keep that animal safe and give them everything they need. And I love working with those sanctuaries. I look up to them. And the ones that are new and the ones that are smaller, I love helping them. Um, Sometimes people are like, well, did you ever worry like that sanctuary is really close to you? Like, what if you lose donors? I was like, it's almost like having one big sanctuary, right? Like, I work so closely with them and I support them and they support me. And we are so much better together. Our community is so much better together. So no, that actually doesn't ever cross my mind that there's competition in that way. Um, but yeah, that's like one of the things, the biggest resource is talking to other sanctuaries. And even if I'm not talking to them, I'm following them on social media and I'm learning a whole lot from them. And there are some that I've reached out to that I haven't heard back from. There are some that surprise me with how much time they've given me, because I know how busy everyone is. But yeah, that's so important. It's my biggest resource for sure.
Absolutely. You're not in this alone.
Mm.
And it's not effective to operate alone completely. But what you do on a day-to-day basis, I know is mainly on your shoulders. I know you have volunteers, but I know that for you, you're probably up at dawn. I don't know. I imagine you're up at dawn and fall into bed finally well after dark. But what give us a glimpse into your life running a sanctuary a bit, the day to day is share a typical day if there is one. I know it's dirty work. It's not sexy, all right.
It's not sexy, it's not glamorous. No, every once in a while, I'll put some makeup on and take a picture, but no, it's not glamorous. But, I've embraced this lifestyle, I love it. It's given me more than I ever anticipated. Um, Being outside with the animals, I can tell you, I appreciate all kinds of weather, and I have seen more stars in the last 4 years, and I've seen more beauty and more wildlife having the sanctuary that I'm so grateful for that. I love being outside. I love the air. I love the sounds, and I'm so fortunate that I get to be surrounded by that all the time. So I have the animals to thank for that too. Can you remind me of the original question? I think I got off track a little bit.
No, what is a typical day?
Oh, yeah.
Like, not like step by step, but like what's the first I know you have to feed the animals and change their bedding, right? And straight
Right.
clean and give them their meds, if that's required sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. So now with daylight savings time ending, I do have to wake up and let out. Mainly, it's like letting out the birds out of their coops and their huts. I have to do that, when the sun is up. Otherwise, they lose it. They can start to hurt each other. They're in close quarters with one another. So that's really important. And then I come back inside and I get my daughter ready for school and I send her off on the bus and then I go back outside and I feed everyone. And with 20 animals, 6 different species, it takes me an hour to feed everyone. Um, and then that's just feeding them. That's not like cleaning up from them. That's not getting all of their waters filled. That's just breakfast. So once I get all the waters filled, I'll typically do do some repairs if something has broken, especially if it makes a structure unsafe for the animals. Um, I will trim hooves or administer medicine if necessary. Some of that happens during breakfast, though. Like if it's a pill, Mukti is a champ. She is like a medicine goddess. I used to do all kinds of crazy things to trick her, like, you know, put it in a put it in a pumpkin seed and this and that. And I never thought, oh, this is so simple. I just put the pill in my hand and she eats it. So sometimes that part's easy and effortless. Um, but there is a lot of, spot cleaning of stalls, replacing bedding. Um, Yeah, just making sure that every day everything is safe and ready for those animals. And animals poop a lot, so that's a really big part of it. Yeah, there's a lot of poop.
Constantly, yes.
And then I'll typically try and do some administrative work. And again, I'm outside when I do that, so it's wonderful. I go outside with my computer. I let all the birds out to free range, and I just keep my eye on the sky and keep attention to my surroundings to make sure there are no predators around. It's one of my um, biggest anxieties, right? And as an inexperienced sanctuary years ago, we did lose some animals to predators, and I hate thinking about it. I hate admitting it, but all of those awful things that have happened are learning experiences and help me help the animals that we have now. So yeah, I spend a couple hours outside doing administrative work. That could be finances, advertising, updating something on Patreon, and social media posts, which keep people informed and interested and spread the word about what we do. And then sometimes I have to ask vets a question or schedule a vet to come by. Um, and also planning fundraisers. That's a big one. um, Currently, Fluffy Butt is funded about 75% by individual donors. And then the other ways are our classes and workshops and our glamping site, and then the fundraisers that we organize. Um, and there's also designing merch and ordering merch and figuring out how to sell it and updating the website and updating the glamping site. It's never ending. It really is. And I don't want to scare people that do want to open a sanctuary, because you don't have to have a glamping site, and you don't even have to start with a website, right? You can have an Instagram account or a Facebook account. But we have evolved in that way and figured out that these are good sources of revenue for us. So that keeps us running really smoothly. But it's a lot. It's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot, and it's good to tell us the reality of it. It really is. You don't need to romanticize it. I mean, there's lots of aspects of what you're doing. There's on one hand, I hear you when you talk about the animals and just hanging outside with them and being with them and how healing it is to be with them. Like, it sounds heavenly to me, but I know the other side of it is it's a lot of work, and it's 24/7, and you think about them all the time and you worry about them, and you wear a lot of hats, literally and figuratively, in terms of you probably become an amazing handy woman, and
Yeah,
your husband
I
will
have.
have you've had to become more handy, like a carpenter. You've had to become and you've had to learn about, like you said, the different species. Like, they all have their own special needs as species. You can't lump them together. I mean, you have and within their species, they're unique and they're all individuals,
Hmm.
right? And so I'm sure it's been a lot of trial and error, and you probably would do things differently if you could to do them over, but that's the learning process, right?
Absolutely. And stepping back and saying, I have been doing this for 4 years. Just 4 years, right? The the progress that we've made and how much we have grown and how much people believe in us, um, that feels really good, right? I take pride in that. It's only been 4 years.
Yeah. Look how much you've done in 4 years, in only 4 years. It really I don't know if it seems like it went fast, or some days it seems like it was a long time ago when you started, but, from
Yeah,
a
well, it's kind of like parenting. That's like parenting when they say, the days are long and the years are short, I think is the saying. It feels like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I want to talk more about that, and talk about, your residents, of course. Um, but first, let's backtrack a bit. Maybe you could comment about a little bit about the animal agriculture industry and what your thoughts are about that inherent cruelty, because there's so much invisibility and false marketing in the industry, but there's nothing humane when it comes to commodifying animals for food. And I know you agree with that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I only went vegan 13 years ago, and a lot of vegans are like, "Oh my gosh, I should have known sooner," right? But everybody's journey is different, and we learn at different paces. And I'm still learning so much, and there's so much left. So many forms of cruelty and exploitation that are left for me to learn about. And that can be really discouraging and disheartening. But it's important to know. But it's really great that I have a child and we're raising her vegan. And it's almost like starting at the beginning and explaining things simply to start. Um, and telling her why in our house we don't have milk or milk products, why we don't have eggs. She understands completely why we don't buy meat, but it's been difficult for her to understand why we don't have those animal byproducts as well. So explaining that to her, like, and relating it to her world too. Like, she knows that I made milk because I gave birth to her, right? So we can relate that and she can understand that that's what all mammals do, right? Um, and then I kind of let her fill in the blanks as well. And explaining it to her feels good because it's kind of like explaining it to someone who visits Fluffy Butt who has no idea, right? Has no idea that a cow makes milk because it gave birth, right? Like, a lot of people don't put two and two together. And then so there's a whole trail of the process to explain why that's bad, right? And the scale of it. The scale of it just feels like doom, right, to me. So it can put me in a place and make me feel depressed, but I know that this is the work I chose to do and I believe in it, and all I can do is educate other people, right?
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about the animal stories because the animals themselves shift people's awareness and their emotions and help you to speak for them and let them know where they came from. And I love that you just sort of shared, maybe there are some vegan adults out there, vegan parents who don't know exactly how to raise a vegan child and want to do it in a way that, keeps the child in mind. And you're, like you said, explaining it at their level as, because they're hearing it for the first time is just a really good, and it helps you too. It helps for you to vocalize and verbalize so that it's good practice for when you're speaking to people at the sanctuary. So let's talk about your animal family. And they really are family. And you said
Oh, yeah.
you have 20 animals there. Why is it important to tell the animal stories from their point of view and maybe share whichever resident you'd love to share around their story? How did they come to you maybe, and how did they get to you? And give our audience a sense of what they go through prior to arriving at Safe Haven Fluffy Butt.
Yeah. Yeah. Every single one of them has a different story, right? And so it takes me, when I give people a tour, it takes me one whole hour to tell their story. So we have 20 of them, and that's me trying to condense it, right? I've mentioned Mukti earlier. Mukti came from a factory farm in Delaware, and this factory farm was shutting down during COVID. And factory farms typically shut down by VSDs, which are ventilator shutdowns, which cuts off all airways. So it's a mass killing of all of the animals, and it's slow and it's painful and it's inhumane. And Mukti was one of thousands who were rescued. And I asked Monsi, "How did you pick her?" And she said she was the only one that didn't run from me. And Mukti ended up here, and I get to tell her story all the time, right? And she's one of so many. And just again, the scale of that and letting people know how heavy that is. Um, and and Mukti gives me that great opportunity to tell people about the, chicken industry and what free range means. Technically, she was a free range chicken. She was in a huge building with bad ventilation, um, dead animals around her, disease, no light, a horrible place. Um, and when I tell people that, they can't believe it. Like, but free range is when they don't. Free range just means they don't have a cage, right? They're not crammed in cages with each other. It doesn't mean they've ever seen the sun. Doesn't mean they've ever touched the grass. They definitely haven't known love from a human, that's for sure. So Mukti's a great example because again, I can tell people about the chicken industry, but also the egg industry, right? People say, "Well, what do you do with the eggs?" And I say, I feed them back to the chickens. Ew. What do you mean, ew? Well, they lay the egg. Is that like cannibalism? Like, well, first off, there's no fetus in there, right? It's not fertilized. We don't have a rooster. And it came from them. And if that's ew, what's it like when you eat it, right? Like, people don't think about that. Um, and so yeah, we do feed them back to the chickens. And that's like another full circle thing because I get to tell about like the nutrients inside of an egg and what that how that has actually helped Mukti. Because when she arrived, she didn't have the proper nutrition, right? They're not bred to be healthy birds. They're bred to get really big, really fast, and killed at 6 to 8 weeks of age. And so Mukti's 4 now. She's 4. And when she arrived, she was laying soft eggs, which kind of feel like a water balloon. So the shell was soft, but it had the white and it had the yolk. So I would crack the eggs from everyone else, and I would crush up the shell, and I would feed them to her. They eat the shell. And within a couple weeks, she was laying hard eggs. So she was getting the calcium she needed, and I didn't uh, feel the need to find any sort of additional supplement that was man-made. Some people give oyster shells for that. So why hurt other animals to save another one when the answer's right there, right? It's right there.
It's so
Yeah.
important.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's I was just gonna say it's so important what you're saying and using Mukti's name. She has a name, right? It really drives home the point that we tend to think collectively of as chickens as a group, and that allows people to be desensitized to their plight. But when you're pointing out an individual with a name and a face named Mukti, and you know her story and you can share about that, um, it helps people to see that they are individuals the same as our cats and dogs. Personalities. They have personalities. They have likes and dislikes and needs and patterns, right?
And friends.
And they make friends and they bonds with both humans and friends within their own species, right? And interspecies friendships. So you can speak to that directly because you see how, when I volunteer at Fluffy Butt, I love seeing how they're all interacting with one another. They're getting annoyed with each other, they're talking with each other, they're hanging out with each other. I mean, it's just amazing. So, you know.
Yeah, and it's beautiful to see some of those bonds. Mukti came to Fluffy Butt with Rosie, and they're best friends. They always know where each other are, and they definitely live at different speeds. Mukti is very slow. She has arthritis, right? We give her an anti-inflammatory. We sometimes wrap her leg, to give her some, to relieve some of the pressure. And she moves very slowly. All of the volunteers do the Mukti taxi when it's time when it's time to feed them, right? Everybody else runs and follows and yay, food, but Mukti's way back there. So we pick her up and bring her with us. She's such a love, right? She's such a love. Because she's a little bit less active. Well, I don't want to say that. She's less nimble, I guess. Her claws grow and I have to trim them. She's the only bird we have that I have to trim their claws. Um and, there are a couple different holds or meditative things I do with her, and she trusts me and she calms down and she knows I'm not going to hurt her and she lets me do what I need to do. And then off she goes back into the sunlight with her friends.
Beautiful, beautiful. Love it. And can you say a bit about Newman's story? Because he's such a great example of not so much the animal agriculture industry that he didn't come from, but he was being used as entertainment, quote unquote, right, in a petting zoo. So and he's come so far.
Oh my gosh, he's come so far. So Newman has been with us for 2 years. When he arrived here from a petting zoo, he was overweight. Because he was so overweight, he had so much fat around his eyes that he is fat blind. Unfortunately, he still is, even though he's done a lot of work. We've done lots of dieting. Um, and he came here with his best friend Cosmo, and they spent 10 years together in a petting zoo, unfortunately operated by the New Jersey County like Parks and Rec system. So we were paying for that place to operate. And people could come visit the animals during open hours, but there were no employees supervising what people were doing around the animals. So Newman and Cosmo both got fed whatever people brought, whatever was left from their picnic, who knows. And and that is a form of neglect. That is a form of abuse because this animal is becoming obese and immobile and you're allowing it to happen. And fortunately, activists and community members became outraged and worked together, worked hard for a long, long time, right, Michelle?
Mhm.
um, to get this place shut down. But that means all those animals have to go somewhere. And luckily, Cosmo and Newman ended up here at Fluffy Butt. We also have Emerald and Luna, two turkeys from that same petting zoo. And then here at Fluffy Butt, Cosmo and Newman had a beautiful housewarming party for a chateau that we built we had to fundraise for, and In Defense of Animals sponsored the housewarming party and donated a big chunk of money and loved their story. Their housewarming party was this beautiful little gathering with some cookies, vegan of course, and some pumpkins to feed the pigs and some other produce, and people brought them gifts, and it was a really beautiful way to honor them. And I love that even though, Cosmo passed away in April, they were able to spend that time together here with everything that they needed to thrive. But there was a lot of healing, and there still is for Newman. There's a lot of healing that has to be done and that had to be done for Cosmo to live that comfortable life. Cosmo was very arthritic and very slow, was walking on his elbows when he arrived here. And I mean, something so simple as a pain reliever or an anti-inflammatory, something so simple. You throw it in their food, like the petting zoo couldn't do that. Um, and Newman would follow what Cosmo was doing. And I didn't realize until Cosmo's death that Cosmo was Newman's seeing eye pig. And to see Newman grieve and feel lost without Cosmo was something I never really anticipated his experience to be and my experience to be. Um, and one of my favorite stories, um, Cosmo passed away April 6th of this year, 2024. And we left him in the chateau with Newman and gave Newman time to realize that he was gone. Um, and we kind of sat far away and had a cup of coffee and talked about Cosmo's life. And maybe an hour later, we came back and Newman, I get all teary thinking about it. Newman had taken all of the straw in the chateau, mouthful by mouthful, and covered Cosmo. And that was his way of, you know, letting him go and processing that he lost his best friend. Um, that always gets me. When I tell people that, they realize how complex an animal can be and how we share such similar qualities with them. And then after that, Newman was lost. Like, yeah, like literally, he didn't know his location, bumping into things, not knowing how to get out of the chateau, forgetting where the ramp is to get down. Once he was finally out in his yard, having to like do the perimeter to get his bearings. And so that's been a whole new learning experience for him. And he's on the right track now. He's doing great. He knows where he is. He knows the layout of his land. But he doesn't have a partner right now. And we've tried introducing him to the other pigs, and there wasn't a good fit. So this is the first time I'm saying this out loud, but there is a beautiful 6-year-old pig named Ruby who we will touch base with next week, who's probably coming to Fluffy Butt to live with Newman. And so I want to do everything I can to keep his quality of life, you know, to keep things great for him, to keep him happy and healthy and cared for and loved. I definitely don't want him to be lonely.
Well, thank you so much for taking Newman and Cosmo in and for all that you do and for reminding us. I know it's hard to talk about and I know that you've had lots of loss. You've grieved and continue to grieve the loss of every resident. And a lot of what you do is hospice care, end of life care, knowing that you may lose them at some point. And it's a great reminder because we rarely think about animals relating to one another and grieving one another and depending on one another and the relationships they have with one another as real relationships. And we think about our own grief, of course, but whatever science says about whether animals grieve, firsthand, you see it, you witness it, and absolutely the answer is yes, they grieve. They grieve in their own way. We don't need to compare it to our grief or dissect it, but they absolutely do. And so, part of running a sanctuary is you love and lose, and losing the animals through illness, and it's heart-wrenching because you love them and you are invested in their well-being and their family. So is there anything else you want to impart to people about grieving an animal? Most people live with animals. They have their companion animals. And of course, we know and honor that we, of course, grieve. Um, but what's it been like and what have you learned from losing?
Yeah. I've lost people, and I've lost animals. I've only been present when one person has passed away, but I've been present when many animals have passed away. And my grieving has changed so much since I've had the sanctuary. I actually think it's quite healthy. Um, when I know an animal is at the end of their life, I ask for more help. I let our volunteers know, like, I definitely need some more hands involved. And they love that because they want to spend more time with them before they pass. But I used to hold it in during the end of their life, hold my emotions in and try and keep it together for them. And and then once they pass away, I would lose my mind and go into a sort of depression for a little while and not want to talk about it because I would burst out in tears. But that has changed so much. I find myself really teary and really sad, and that's okay. Um, to do that a little bit around them. I definitely walk away when I'm feeling really emotional. But I actually do. I start my grieving um, as they're declining. It's okay for them to know I feel sad. I don't want them to know I feel angry and frustrated and overwhelmed and all that. But I think that it's really healthy, right? And then once the animal passes, I'm able to think about their life in a different way and reminisce about all the wonderful things I've experienced with them. And that feels really good to me, especially also because a lot of our volunteers will get really sad once the animal passes, and I can kind of be there for them too, as an emotional support and let them have their grieving and listen to them, right? And I that's not the time that I cry and so it's been different. I'm growing in ways that I never really thought I would.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I feel the same as an activist. I'm not the same person I was when I think about my journey and where I started and where I am now. And it's been through activism and for you through your relationship with Sanctuary, that it's just one of the side benefits that we have to grow. We force ourselves to grow because we put the animals first. We're thinking about them. They need us. So we got to be stronger. And we have to honor our weaknesses, of course, as well, and our frailties. And we're still, very much human. And so you have some great humans around you. You have the animals, and it draws great humans, I think, like a magnet to you with what you're doing, directly, and then your circle, and so maybe talk a bit because part of what I hope to achieve with this podcast today is to spark a fire in someone who may be thinking about opening a micro sanctuary or a sanctuary. And so you rely on your volunteers. So how important and essential are volunteers, and how do you manage your volunteers? That aspect of it when you put that hat on as sanctuary, administrator or running the sanctuary. How do you manage your volunteers, and are there any systems that you've learned to put in place to make it more streamlined with volunteers and just your daily routine, I guess?
Yeah. Yeah, it's so important. For the first maybe year and a half, I did it all by myself. And I think it's important for someone who is interested in starting a sanctuary, micro sanctuary. It's so important to think about and to talk to your housemates, spouse, whoever is in your life, how that will affect them, you together, and your lifestyle. Because if you like to travel, you really need to think about if a micro sanctuary is even a possibility. Is that a good idea? Um, uh, volunteers are consistent volunteers are where it's at. Um, Before I started the sanctuary, I went to a wildlife refuge and I said, I'm a teacher. I have all summer to volunteer. And they're like, we're really sorry, but that's actually not helpful for us. And I just didn't understand that. Now I understand it. Because when you have someone who volunteers here or there, you're spending your time with that person, showing them how to do something when really you could have done that on your own much quicker. And so it's helpful to have those volunteers that show up daily or weekly or just on some sort of schedule, right? Where you can have them trained and that this is going to get done at this time. That's so helpful. And if someone's thinking of starting a sanctuary, it is ask for help. It took me a year and a half and I didn't even have the idea to ask for help. I had a friend say, "You need help. You need other people. I'm going to come on Mondays and you're going to show me what to do, and you will at least have one feeding taken care of." And now I have over half of the feedings taken care of. I can eat dinner with my family. I can play a game with my kid. I can see my kid on the bus in the morning because I have some morning volunteers. So all of those people have like literally changed my life and made my life better. And so I am grateful for anyone that can commit that time. And they fall in love with it. They love it. Some people love it because they love being outside, and they live in a city, right? This is their opportunity to come be in quiet in nature with animals and get dirty.
Get
Yeah.
back get back to basics. Yeah, so volunteer,
Great.
it's good work, it's hard work, and it's rewarding work, and that's what I found when I volunteer with you as well. I mean, it's just a really great it's just a win-win. It's a win-win-win, all around. So I just wanna recap what you said. One of your tips in terms of, you know, for those who may be thinking about doing this, you must ask for help. You must. You don't have to put it all on your shoulders. It is not a weakness to ask for help. It is a strength to ask for help. And consider maybe it's not for you, or at least the timing is not best now if you want your lifestyle to include a lot of travel and you want to continue with the lifestyle you've always had. This turns that topsy-turvy, right? Because the animals are there 24/7 and they need care.
That's right. And so maybe before, not maybe, is a great piece of advice is to find a sanctuary and volunteer, commit one day a week, see what that's like.
Yes.
Because if that's hard, yeah, yeah. Because one of the worst things that you can do is burn out, because then you're doing more harm than good, more harm for yourself, more harm for all of the residents under your care. Burning out is bad, right?
Yeah, and then ultimately, I think there are examples of that out there where that has happened, where people get in over their heads, or they grow too fast, or they don't have supports or systems in place, and then what? Then they have to fold. Folding is forced upon them, or they have to make that terrible decision to fold, and then what? Then you have to find placement for the animals. So I'm glad we're talking about help, how you get help. And I want to talk about your family because your situation is so wonderfully unique in that your mom, your dad, your husband, and your daughter are all involved in Fluffy Bot. What is it like for you as a family effort? What does it mean to have your family be your team? To me, it sounds almost like a dream, but I'm sure it has issues as well, potentially, but at least you're all aligned. And many families wish for that, to have that common ground that brings you together. You get to make memories as well as make a huge difference for animals. So, what's that like?
Yeah, I mean, to be completely honest, my mom and my dad will come help. But again, everyone has their different way of helping, right? My dad is more of a call me when you need something repaired, not like a scheduled volunteer thing. My mom's the cook. She makes a huge vegan meal for when we have volunteer days. My husband is a huge emotional support and currently a financial support for me that allows me to do this. So while he's not, directly helping me care for the animals, I could not do this without him. And again, in all honesty, like my daughter doesn't love it. She doesn't love it. Which it took me a while to realize why. She was 4, and one day she asked me if I love the animals more than her. And talk about heartbreaking. Um, but that's because she watched me spend so much time with the animals. And she held that. She internalized that. And that is changing. Again, it's ever changing. She had 2 friends stop by because they wanted to meet the animals. And she asked, "Can I give them the tour?" And I sat back. I like held back a little bit. I kept quiet. I followed along, and she gave a beautiful tour and told stories and explained some of the ways animals are exploited and told, like, you can't act like this near Rudy. You have to do this because this is what happened to him and he doesn't like when you touch him. Right. And so I know she's paying attention. And that was the first time that I felt her sense of pride with it all. And so it's always transforming. And while my family, it doesn't play the same role in Fluffy Butt as I do, it definitely is a machine that is getting more and more well-oiled for sure.
Nice, beautiful. So we're going to wrap up in a bit, but how can people find you and support you?
Yes. So we have a website, which is www.fluffybuttrescue.org. And on the website, you can make a donation. You can learn about our classes and workshops, which are seasonal. So they'll be coming back in the spring. You can learn about our glamping site. You can shop some merchandise. You can read all of the animals' stories, including the animals who have passed away. Everybody is on there. And you can learn about our team and our mission and how we got started and how you can support us. If it's not through a monetary donation, there are other ways like donating old blankets, doing a blanket collection for our pigs in the winter. And then there's always social media, which we try and update daily. There's Instagram and Facebook. And one of my lovely volunteers started a TikTok account for us. Um, and I believe that's all. And then, of course, schedule a tour, right? We were doing public tours seasonally, but you can always, if you're a hardy person and don't mind bundling up and being out, we'd be happy to show you around and have you meet the animals in person.
Nice. So any final words, words of hope, or what is your most hopeful vision for the future?
My most hopeful vision is that people open their minds and their hearts to know more and realize that they can create change by changing their habits.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. So, Rae, it's been really a pleasure, and I hope you can let it in when I say you are truly an inspiration to me, and I am so impressed because you are doing exactly what you've been put on earth to do as selfless service. I know it's a labor of love. The animals express their gratitude in their own way every day to you, yet on their behalf, I say thank you. And I want everyone to follow Fluffy Butt and check out fluffybuttrescue.org. That's two T's, right? FLUFFYBUTT rescue.org and support Fluffy Butt. Rae, thank you so much for being on the Animal Liberation Hour.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you all for listening. Please rate and review the podcast so others can find us and be inspired by our guests and topics. If you enjoy the Animal Liberation Hour and would like to support our work, please consider joining AAC's Patreon. Even as little as $2 a month goes a long way in helping us expand our reach and increase our impact. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, where you can keep up with the podcast as well as everything AAC. One more reminder that you can sign up for a free mentor to help you with your activism at animalactivismmentorship.com. Our work extends beyond mentorship to include collaborations and mutual support with other grassroots animal rights groups. So reach out to us to become part of the AAC community. If you've been waiting for the right time to get active for the animals, this is it. Their need is urgent and critical right now. Remember that it will take all of us to achieve animal liberation, so stay focused, remain optimistic, be effective, and keep doing your part. Until next time, this is AAC signing off.